So next we're going to do the keyhole elastic. So what you're going to do is lay out your back so it's nice and flat like this. The type of keyhole you have is going to determine how you measure your elastic. Where it's a very narrow but deep one here, basically how I measure it is just top to bottom here and then doubled over. If you have one that's wider out, like say it was out like here, I would measure from this point here to the furthest point out to the bottom seam and then double that. But because this is just very narrow, it's just straight down. So I'm going to sew that in. Now what I do after I get the first couple stitches in is I fold this over to find the halfway point. You can find the halfway point before you sew if you want. I just hold it down to the center back seam and give it a stretch. And it is important to stretch everything once you stretch, because when you get to the bottom here, you're going to give it a little bit more stretch to get around that bottom curve. But then once you stretch the elastic to meet, you want to stretch everything all together. And then once again, meet this up with the front, stretch it to meet the fabric, and then stretch everything all together. And that's going to allow the most stretch so you can get into it. As for the neckline for that, like this, you can see where the center front is because there is a fold there. So for this, I do the same thing where I'll measure the center front to the shoulder seam, and the shoulder seam to the end. And I don't do it around the curve, I do it just as a direct, straight across it. And then I cut that in half, or double that, sorry. And I do the front neckline the same way I did the keyhole, where I'll sew a few stitches, find the center front of the outfit, and pull it all. And once you get to the center front, hold it to the end, stretch everything. There you've got your elastic put in for the keyhole and the neckline. So now that we've got all the elastic into the bodice, we're going to need to flip the elastic and stitch it down. I do the widest zigzag. You can vary a little bit. I do tend to recommend the wide zigzag for a few reasons. It is more durable in terms of how far it'll stretch. But also I find when you have a very narrow zigzag, it tends to basically just sew right on the edge here, and you can have kind of a flipping. I find a wide zigzag keeps everything nice and flat. So I will always start on the raw edge of the keyhole when I'm doing an elastic and a keyhole neck, and I sew the whole thing in one kind of loop. So as I'm going, I do it with the right side facing up because I find that easier to get a nice smooth edge here. You can do it the other way if you have the wrong side facing up and fold it down like this. I find it's easier to get little bumps when I'm doing that, so I don't. Everyone works differently, so whatever works best for you. So basically, as you sew, you're going to want to pull the fabric out and over the elastic here. So you want a nice sharp edge on this edge here. So I basically cut my fingers underneath it to help guide the elastic, and then I pull with this. And I guide with my thumb. So basically, this hand is pulling this way, the thumb is smoothing it out, and these fingers are kind of pulling. It sounds really complicated, but I swear it's really easy once you start doing it. So what you're doing is stitching right over the edge of the elastic here, and you'll feel it and you can see it. I use the edge of my presser foot as a bit of a guide. If I can see a little bit of the edge of the fabric and the elastic, then I know I'm like positioned really well. You don't want to sew too close to the edge, or else you're going to get ruffling, you're going to get flipping, and it just doesn't look as good. Then as I come to the end, I just make sure that it's held flush with everything here. As I approach that side, and this is going to depend a bit on how wide your keyhole is, I'll flip the next edge. I didn't do it early enough there. And just hold everything straight together. So to the end, pivot. Yep, get that going. Just till there's enough through. Then same thing. And again, I just come to the end here. Just get everything all lined up. Trim all your threads. There you've got the neck and the keyhole all sewn together.